The Africa Business Club is actually a fully student-run organization. And, you know, I guess looking back, we can't necessarily say we have all our ducks in a row. We do leverage a whole lot of people ranging from staff, you know, different references, different contacts, and just different resources, some of whom are, you know, all over this room. One of those such resources is Professor Catherine Duggan. She's the advocate of Africa on the Harvard Business School campus. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about the Nigeria case, the really famous Nigeria case, Opportunities and Crisis. She wrote that case, along with many others, including the case on Uganda. She's someone that inspires me every time I get to sit down with her. I get really inspired, really energized, really fired up. And I would just say you guys should get excited, because I think you're in for a treat this morning. Basically, Professor Catherine Duggan, she's an assistant professor in the Biggie unit. Now, when I say Biggie, I'm not talking about the rapper, obviously. Biggie here stands for Business, Government, and International Environment. She teaches here in the RC class. That's the first year class, and it's the required curriculum class. And her research examines financial sector regulation, microfinance, and contract enforcement in developing markets. Her current book examines the historical evolution of credit market regulation, and she argues that government incentives for group-based supervision have provided an effective, low-cost regulatory option in markets as diverse as medieval England, colonial Uganda, and a few others in the 20th century. Professor Duggan received her PhD in political science from Stanford University. No offense to her, she's in the right place now, where she was the G.L. Lieberman Fellow for Social Sciences. And prior to attending Stanford, she was an industry expert for the telecommunications group of the law firm of Meyer, Brown, and Platt. And she received her BA with highest honors in political science from Brown University. Like I said, get excited, get ready, and please join me in welcoming Professor Catherine Duggan.
Thanks very much. These guys are too kind. I will say I am absolutely in the right place. I'm absolutely in the right place at HBS, not just at Harvard. And I'm in the right place in this room this morning. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure and a privilege for me to stand in this room and look out at the current and future leaders of Africa. It's an amazing thing for me to look out at these faces of yours full of hope, opportunity, knowledge, and real understanding of what the situation is on the continent. HBS has only come to understand just how important Africa is and just how important Africa will be in the past decade and a half. Once upon a time, HBS thought that Africa was the place you put your money after you made it somewhere else. Now, we know there is a lot of money on the table. There are a tremendous number of opportunities, and a tremendous number of opportunities not only to make money, but to make money and foster change, to foster change on the continent. One of the reasons why I'm here, one of the reasons why I find this so exciting is that I think these people, you people in this room, us in this room, are the people who are going to foster change, and much of that is going to be done through the private sector, through the sorts of themes and ideas that we hear today at this conference. So I wanted to just kick off the conference by talking a little bit about African regional integration. So we know in this room how vibrant Africa is, how vibrant Africa's cities are right now. And I can tell you that because of population trends, Africa is destined to become a big, big deal in the future. It already is a big deal, but it's guaranteed to be a very big deal in the future just through sheer population. Now the difference is we in this room can decide how that population gets leveraged. Are the children of today going to live in one of the greatest and most vibrant economies? Or are the children of today going to be forced to muddle through? Or perhaps are things going to get worse? This is not a foregone conclusion. It's something that we in this room can actually help determine. So one of the things that we know is that Africa has reached out all over the world. You can see this because Nigerian banks seem to have bought up every single billboard in Heathrow Airport. But one of the interesting things is, if you want to get from Nigeria to, say, Kenya, the easiest way to go is through Heathrow Airport, which is a funny thing in a continent which is actually a continent. Now, we, again, in this room know that Africa is not a country. Some people apparently don't know that. Those of you who've ever been asked what the capital of Africa is understand what I'm talking about. But that doesn't mean that we can't have more regional integration. That doesn't mean that working together is not going to be the best way to move forward. There are lots of challenges. One of the things that we've seen is a colonial history, and I'd like to point out how difficult the challenges are when your borders and political systems were actually created by people whose native dress is what we see on the left. How can you trust that? However, we have these institutions within which we have to work and which we can change, which we can make demands about. Integration is not easy. We see this in Europe. One of the things that I'd like to say is Europe has made a number of critical mistakes in thinking about how to integrate. Africa doesn't have to make those same mistakes. We can come up with new ideas, new theories of integration, a new model of integration for the 21st century, which doesn't look like anything that anybody's ever seen before, but which makes everybody want to follow in Africa's footsteps. There is no more innovative place in the world. There's no place in the world where people feel freer to imagine a new future and can actually make that new future come to pass. And we have, in this room, to think about what that new future might look like. And so I wanted to go back for a moment and give you an example of the sorts of thinking that happened in the US, which is one of the most successful cases of regional integration, which became a country in the end. The American framers had to sit down and think about how to do this. So first, they thought about government. First, they thought about how exactly to make sure that government worked for the people rather than stealing from the people, which is what the previous British administration had done, which is what the king had done before. So Madison, in his statement about what he saw in this new country, in this new region, was, he said, in framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. This is one of the things that I believe we need most in Africa and from the people in this room. We need to work together to figure out how to create good incentives for good leadership from the top. And it doesn't always work immediately. I will point as well to the US's experience with its civil war. There were regional tensions, there were all kinds of problems. There was a South which was literally burned to the ground. And in the middle of the war, Abraham Lincoln said, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." What he is saying is, we cannot get trapped into the way that we used to think about things. We have to come up with new ideas, but when we come up with new ideas, that's what's going to do it. So, obviously, coming up to the present, Nelson Mandela said exactly this, and he's one of the people who changed his country in ways that one could barely even imagine. He tells us a little bit how to do it. He says, if you talk to a man in a language that he understands, that goes to his head. If you speak to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. One of the tremendous strengths of the people in this room, of us, is that we understand the continent and feel really passionate about it. There is a way to talk to people which makes them understand. The people in this room have a better sense of that than anybody. How to speak to the private sector, how to speak to government, how to speak to populations, to ask them, to encourage them, and to charge them with the responsibility to change the continent and to change the world in doing so. So let me leave you with one of my favorite pictures ever. This is a boy in school. It was taken in South Africa in the early 1960s. I want you to look at this boy. He is sitting on the floor in school. He has beads of sweat running down his face. He is trying unbelievably hard to learn. But he has no reasonable expectation that he is even going to be able to move freely around his country. He has no expectation that what he is learning he will ever be able to put into practice, because there is a system which is designed to prevent him from reaching his full opportunity, from being everything that he could possibly be. And yet, this boy is probably in his mid-50s now. He might now be running an international conglomerate. He might be the person whom you would like to ask why you get such bad network on your cell phone. He could be anything, and it's because people changed the country. People looked and saw what was wrong, they banded together, and they changed it in intensely productive ways. It's hard, it's frustrating, it's going to be hard, it's going to be frustrating. But at the moments when it feels too hard and too frustrating, I would ask you to think about this boy who was willing to put in the work, who was willing to put in the sacrifice, and who was willing to be frustrated for something that he didn't even know, just because he believed. Just because he believed in himself, he believed in the future, he believed in the future of his country. That's why we're here, because we believe deeply, deeply in the future of Africa, in the future of every single one of our countries, and in the possibility that we can actually change the world by being here, by talking to one another, by listening to one another, by beginning to understand what it is that we can do, and then leaving this room, leaving this campus, and going out and doing it immediately. So welcome. This is a tremendous opportunity. It's an opportunity for everybody, myself included, and I can't wait to meet you, to talk to you, and to listen to the amazing presentations. So with that, I think that we have a presentation now, which should be fantastic. So thank you very much.